Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew, that's everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, well, I'm here to talk, as the title suggests, of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about development stories, marketing stories, release stories, production stories, all the ingredients that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love, just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. Now, what you've happened upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast, one where I bring in a filmmaker to talk about their work or a recent release. And in this case, it's a very, very warm welcome back to Ol Parker, who I had a very long conversation with in a special episode a year or two back. And since then, at the end of that episode, he told me in a deleted clip from the interview, just because he didn't want to tempt fate, that he was just off to make a film with Julia Roberts and George Clooney. And since then, he's gone off and made a film with Julia Roberts and George Clooney. Now, that film is Ticket to Paradise, which here in the UK is now available on DVD and Blu-ray. And I really like doing interviews with filmmakers sometime after the release of their movie, where they're not so much in the initial promotional cycle of the film and can be a little bit reflective over the release. And I think you're going to find that here. Now, Ticket to Paradise is a rom-com. It's a really good, enjoyable, fluffy rom-com as well, set in beautiful surroundings. Ol Parker co-wrote it and directed the film. And before that, he'd directed and co-written Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again as well. And so you'll hear a little bit of that. But mainly this chat is about Ticket to Paradise, about the modern movie marketplace, really, about what he's up to and his thoughts on all sorts of bits and bobs to do with film. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to play you a clip from the trailer for Ticket to Paradise, and you'll hear my conversation with Ol Parker, the other side of this.
I'm sorry. I think your things are in my seat.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, come on.
You've got to be kidding me.
Excuse me, ma'am. I need to sit somewhere else. We used to be married.
Worst 19 years of my life.
We were only married for 5.
I'm counting the recovery.
In 4 days' time.
Our daughter's gonna marry a guy she just met in Bali, millions of miles from home.
I just really want to kiss you. It's like I looked up for the first time and realized everything I ever wanted was right in front of me.
She's throwing her career away.
Just like her mother did. So I'm the only one who can stop her. She doesn't listen to him.
Oh, champagne.
Oh, 2, please.
Just leave the bottle. Thank you.
So that was a clip from Ticket to Paradise, and returning to the podcast. And if he does 3 appearances, he becomes co-host. Is its co-writer and its director, Ol Parker. Ol, hello. How are you?
I'm happy to be back, Simon. How are you doing?
We're still going, still here. I've just been observing, and it comes across beautifully in audio, that the room in which you record, where you recorded last time, seems to have even more books than it did before. So are you broke, and have you emptied the local bookshop? That seems to be the key question.
I'm an insomniac is what I do, and I read books. I love to read. But yes, it's true. There are piles and piles, and I apologize for the mess.
No, hello. I mean, genuinely, is that what gets you through like very long nights, stories, and lots and lots of reading?
Actually, yeah. Also, Cicero said, "A room without books is a room without a soul." And so I like books. Please me. They're just the fact of them. I don't like reading on a Kindle. I like reading, but I like the tactile experience. And so, but yeah, no, long nights, stories get me through life. I think not just nights. But I mean, yeah, I think narratives and dramas, and I read more non-fiction as I get older. I've become aware, which is the thing. I need to know more things. The more I know I don't know, but the more I seem to want to.
There's an old argument, isn't there, that people who write fictional stories are more drawn to reading non-fiction anyway, in part because the idea won't lodge in their head that they might take from somewhere else, but also all of history is written in fiction rather than non-fiction.
That's definitely, that's interesting. I also, when I'm writing well, I read crappy books like thrillers or not crappy, but just of a less. I don't like to be too engaged. I need to kind of take time off from what I'm doing. So I power through Agatha Christie books, for example.
Are you one of those Amazon reviewers who goes and leaves 3-star reviews of thrillers? Is that you? Have you got a pseudonym?
I never review anything on Amazon. I don't review things on Deliveroo. I have this thing. I don't review apps except for yours. I think you're the only 5 stars I think I've ever given.
Was that the episode you were on?
That was no, it wasn't. It was a more general approval.
Okay.
Than
I'm impressed. I've got 5 stars off you.
I haven't listened to. I've got to say, I haven't listened back to our one. I don't. I don't. That way, madness lies. I don't. I don't tweet myself. That way you can't do these things.
No, I hear you, but I'll take the 5-star review. Thank you very much. I'm just going to mock up a poster as soon as we're off this call. But I read a long interview with you earlier this year before the theatrical release of Ticket to Paradise, and you gave a very movie director answer. And the thing is, I sense with you it's probably true, where you said when you were writing this script, because you started writing this in lockdown, presumably roughly around when we were talking before. So I'll take a co-inspiration credit if you want. But you said you'd written this specifically for 2 actors, for George Clooney and Julia Roberts. And the interview went that if you hadn't have got George Clooney and Julia Roberts, you wouldn't have made the film. And I'm always curious of stuff like that because I read lots of press kits and stuff. Is that true? It's just like if Emma Thompson and Jim Broadbent had come in and,
No, I mean, there's always, I probably have been guilty of it myself, but writing the email going, you were my first and only choice for this to the 7th or 8th actor. Do you know what I mean? So it's actually a great line I do tend to use, which is, you were not the first choice, but you're the right choice, which is, I tend to say that, which is more honest, you know what I mean? So, but in this case, yeah, I mean, it was, it was conceived for them. For all the reasons, obviously they're great and gorgeous and brilliant and movie stars and everything, but also purely specifically for the kind of film that it was. If you're writing about a divorce or making a film about a divorced couple, you want to believe that they were once married, and there's something amazing about their shared history together on and off screen, and how much people long to see their friendship, which is genuine, I can attest to. So it was just, they just bring their authenticity with them as a couple that, 1, you believe they were together, 2, you believe they might not be now, and 3, you desperately want them to be together again. And they just, again, added to their obviously manifold other gifts. Then that was, that was, so I wrote to both of them, which you never do. When you offer a movie to someone, you say, we're thinking of, generally for a movie star, because they like to know what ballpark you're in and who you're looking at, but you don't, or you say the offer is out to us, but you don't ever be really too specific, because if the other person says no, then they'll say no as well, because they'll get insecure and think, what do they know that I don't? Do you know what I mean? Why am I liking this when clearly I shouldn't? And so, but I wrote to both of them at the same time saying, I'm afraid to both of you, it only works if you each do it, if you both do it together. And otherwise, I'm quite happy not to make the movie. And literally, I mean, her character is called Georgia in the script.
Yeah,
in the movie. He was originally called Julius. Yeah. And so Dan and I were writing it, we used to refer to them as Julia and George, and then that seemed too obvious, so we flipped it and called them Julius and Georgia. But then at the point where we were sending it to George, it seemed a little too on the nose, so we switched it to David. But I mean, that's the extent to which it was written for them. And yeah, I was very comfortable. I mean, you never think a film's going to happen anyway. Do you know what I mean? I mean, failure is hardwired into what I do, and I've been incredibly lucky. And even then, it's still, I thought I would get 2 trips to Bali out of it, and
nice.
And some, and a bit of cash, and I got a bit of cash, but I still haven't been to Bali.
a friend of mine put it to me when they had a dream project that kind of they had to retool and change it around. They said, I've got one set of principles, but if they don't work, I've gladly got another if you need them.
Listen, it was never, it's a valid question, and it was never put to the test. I meant it when I wrote to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I meant that this is the version that I want to make, and this is the only way I see it. But I mean, it's entirely possible that a year on from their rejection, I might suddenly go, you know what? I'll tell you who's terrific, et cetera, et cetera. So, but when I meant it when I said it. How's that?
I'll take that. And I mean, you talked when we talked in the past, you talked about the frustration of writing a lot of things that didn't get get made. You talked about a project that you were doing with Tom Hanks that didn't get made, for instance. And I detected the frustration. I mean, you weren't hiding the frustration at that point. But I'm just wondering, when you start writing something like this, is it very, very zeroed in on this one has to get made? This one is going? Because I know you don't start writing things with a view that they won't, but I just wonder if it changes the mindset even a little bit.
Well, the mindset, I mean, not to hopefully sound like a dick, but the mindset changes slightly anyway, is like it's going right for me. Do you know what I mean? And so there's more, you know, Mamma made a lot of money for a lot of people that aren't me. And so the studio are more predisposed. I know that they're looking more kindly on this one. Do you know what I mean? And I know Working Title want to make it, and that they bring an enormous amount of, you know, power and authority and, you know, cash and goodwill with them, as they should do. And so it's not quite so, you know, there's more optimism than perhaps there used to be, where you would just think, you know, I think it's 1 in 7 for me scripts have been made, and that's a really good average.
Yeah,
that's really good. You know, I've been really lucky. So, but I think it's a good question, Simon, but I think you don't think this isn't going to happen. I mean, you can make jokes about it. I remember meeting Richard Osman. I'm now not attached to Thursday Motor Club anymore. And I remember meeting Richard for the first time and really happy. And he's going, "This is great." And I was going, "I'm really excited to be doing the book, and, you know, really hope it works out. But I need to tell you, it's incredibly unlikely that it'll end up being me doing it." Do you know what I mean? And he was like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's just there's so many twists and turns and different versions and different egos and different, you know, and so much money involved and so much passion that it you know, generally doesn't work out." And so, but you go into it with the same. You give it the same 100%, as Clint Eastwood always says about his successes or failures. And then, but I mean, certainly now, I think, I mean, I've just been writing something now, and it feels, I have to say, hopefully not to be cocky, and it could well be that we talk in a year's time and nothing's happened at all.
You'll be co-host by then.
I'll co-host with you, but it feels like, you know, there's, I mean, writing a sequel is interesting because the ball's already rolling down the hill. You're not trying to convince the studio to make it. You know what I mean? If you do a good job, then they want to make it, and that's a different place to be. And I'm nowhere near that with an original film, but there's hopefully people are sort of like, you know, it would be nice if it worked out. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a bit more. I'm not trying quite so hard to convince people, but, you know,
I mean, there's also
the last film that ever gets made that I write. So,
well, there's also the thinking. I've had a few actors tell me this, that you kind of almost hit your creative peak as you hit your 50s, and I even though you look deceptively very young, I think you're late 40s, early 50s now.
I'm 53, but I've used a very good filter on. No, I don't. God bless you.
I haven't.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, I mean, I feel like I've got things to say, and I kind of know how to say them. And I feel, you know, and you just get better. You get better at the business of you know, film writing. You're better at taking notes from the right people, better at saying no to the wrong notes. You know, you just experience, you know, teaches you how to. So much of it is how you do in the room, how you do, you know, and how you develop. Obviously, so much of the process is development. And so it's not just, you know, talent or skill at writing, which it's not for me to say if I've got any, but you get better at the other stuff. Do you know what I mean? And that, which obviously helps the thing be better, helps the script be better, and then hopefully helps the film be better.
There was a narrative around the time of the release of the film, which comes out whenever anyone releases a romantic comedy now, about the romantic comedies back, as if it's ever really gone away. I just think it's morphed into lots of different places. But there's one name you dropped into an interview that I read that hasn't been talked about much, and it's come up a couple of times on this podcast, and it's Donna Langley at Universal. In that and I don't think these stories get told very often, because she gave the green light to James Gray to do Armageddon Time, which on the surface is just not going completely against the trend of where the movie business is now. And I just wonder how important someone like she is in going against where basically box office trends and things are. Was she a pivotal cog in this happening?
She was, and we could have. That's lovely you do your research, Simon. Respect to you. We had the option with this to go to a streamer, and frankly, they would they'd probably pay me more to make it, but they'd certainly pay more for the movie. So the movie could have had even more money than it did. And it was very much. I felt very strongly that if this isn't a movie, I don't know what is. If this isn't a cinema movie, do you know what I mean? For a start, I wanted to get lots of people back in rooms laughing together. because that we all haven't had anywhere near enough of that. Comedy play far better in company than in your sitting room. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or in an airplane or whatever. And so I very much, and I wanted to shoot it widescreen. I wanted to shoot it, we've got two impossibly glamorous leads. So I wanted to, find beautiful locations and make it all gorgeous. And so I very much wanted it to be a film, but then it relies on finding someone that's prepared to match that commitment.
Yeah.
And she, even, she said recently that came out a couple of weeks ago that no one's going to see, but she she keeps trying. She just believes absolutely in the theatrical experience.
Yeah.
And it's the studio's duty to try and promote the theatrical experience in a way that others have, obviously that it's going a certain way. Do you know what I mean? But that doesn't mean that it has to all go that way much too fast, or that we all have to be like lemmings rushing off that cliff. And she's passionate and brilliant. And so, yeah, in the end, it was an easy decision because she made Mamma Mia, and so she's my friend, luckily.
Yeah.
And they have the thing with working title. And so, but she's, enormously impressive and enormously passionate. And Universal are, literally putting their money there, trying to make it work for people. And I was so relieved and glad that we've made them lots of money. It's not something I try and think about too much because it doesn't really changed my life at all, and it's not like Emma Stone brings you a cupcake every $1 million you make for the studio. Do you know what I mean? There's no.
Is that true? That's my clickbait story.
It's a very.
I'm just going to take that completely out of context.
No, it's not like that. No, it's an intangible success. You know what I mean? It's really lovely meeting people that have seen it. It's really lovely getting in taxis and the drivers. It's just really nice making a film that people go. But in terms of the cash, the business aspect of it, it's a weird thing. But particularly for her, with her, I'm very, I felt responsible when I've lost money for other people in the past. And it's really nice to feel like I'm paying back, or not just her, but sort of proving that theory that people will still go if you give them the right product.
It's interesting. The last rom-com I can think of this scale, or one of the last rom-coms, was Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you said there, that they could have made a lot more money going to streaming, and the filmmakers held out for a theatrical release. Yeah. I remember that story coming in. It's weird, isn't it, that the things of this ilk are requiring someone to dig their feet in and say, I'll take less money to make this happen.
Yeah, and George and Julia were part of that too. I have to say, they could have been paid substantially more. Obviously they did fine, but they could have been paid substantially more. And it was just a collective decision. It was also something we all believed in, particularly coming out of it would have been the case anyway, even if the last 3 years hadn't been the last 3 years, but coming out of the pandemic, it was something we all felt very strongly in, and the way the cinemas have been struggling so much.
Don't take this disrespectfully, but when we put you next to George Clooney and Julia Roberts, you strike me as the least powerful person of that trio, just in terms of the scale of Hollywood. And this is the first time really you've done a big movie star vehicle with I always remember Dexter Fletcher talking about Eddie the Eagle, bringing in someone like Christopher Walken, and it does like 5 minutes of the audience work for you, knowing what an actor like that brings straight away to the screen. I'm just wondering how the mechanic of making that film was different for you, because Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again was, you as you described it, was very much everyone mucks in, you're carrying things up the hill. Whereas here at heart, from the outside looking in, it is fundamentally a movie star vehicle.
I'm struggling to get over the disrespect at the beginning of that question.
I'm so sorry. I will write you a lot. Are you revoking your review now?
How dare you suggest I'm less powerful? No, of course. I mean, actually, that's where you rely on, the innate, loveliness and goodwill and friendship and support of George and Julia, because they're 8 times, at least 8 times more powerful than I am on the movie, even though, notionally I'm in charge. And so, there's a version where George just takes over and I sit and eat biscuits, resentfully in a corner. But they were, so no, it was a different thing. I mean, Mamma Mia, I sort of came onto it as a writer and tried to make that work. And then obviously I got the gig, to my astonishment and gratitude. But then, as you say, most of the cast come anyway. Do you know what I mean? They were all in it already. So I'm just the person doing the sequel, and, well done me for sort of making it work. And we all had a lovely time and it did okay. And that's all good, but it's a different thing to have written something for 2 of the biggest stars in the world, and then they say yes, and then they're great. So it was terrifying, just uniquely terrifying. But then, they're lovely. They're both really, really nice. They're both still my friends. I'm really lucky. And so, I talked to George particularly because obviously he's a director. He directs movies. So your biggest fear, 1, that he's just going to be a dick, and 2, that he's just going to be on set going, Are you putting the camera there? Are you? Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's like, oh shit, you know, or worse, like, don't put the camera there, put the camera there. Do you know what I mean? And so that he's gonna, you know, powerful people fear a void above them and step into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so and automatically step into it. And so but he was, and we talked about it. I mean, no, I didn't quite put it like that, but I'm worried you're going to be a dick. But I said, how do you feel about, you know, making him, you know, being just an actor? It's been a while. He's been writing and directing, you know, the 3-4 films he's done. I think he directed as well. And he was like, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to, you know, just doing that bit. And he was great. Every now and then he'd say, maybe try, but that's, you know, great. And he was always right. And they were always just suggestions. And Julia similarly, you know, she's the queen of the genre. Obviously,
Yes.
she understands rom-coms better than anyone. And so if she had you know, they're both, you know, passionate and committed, and they have a brilliant time, and we had a ball, but they work hard. There was a day, there's a day where they get off the boat, and Caitlin and Billy are waiting to meet them, and it's quite a long day, and it's really hot, and it's a very exposed location, and you know, it was just, we're in the sun all day, and everyone was pretty tired towards the end of the day, and you know, Caitlin and Billy were slightly flagging, and I could hear George and Julia in my headphones. They're going, "We still got it. We still," like, every take they just show up. Every take, they never miss a beat. George is amazing, his energy, and both of them. And so, yeah, you just rely on their goodness and their obviously skill, but also kindness and generosity.
One of the I find it particularly interesting talking to filmmakers in the aftermath of the release of their film, just a month or two afterwards, because I mean, there's something almost old-fashioned about just what a staggered release this was as well. But of course, also with the release, you had I mean, the unforeseen circumstance of the death of a monarch. I mean, you put a film out and something that hasn't happened for decades suddenly happens. But can you just take me behind the scenes of that a little bit? If there were worries over the release of the film, because Universal put it back fairly late in the day for fairly obvious reasons.
We were doing press that afternoon. I think we knew sooner than many that it had happened, because we were doing press, and suddenly people were cancelling left, right, and centre. All my interviews were, you know, because there was obviously a considerably bigger story unfolding. And so,
I mean, no offense, but yeah.
no. It's a huge thing. And so, yeah, it was just, we were going to come out that weekend, and it was just felt, I mean, George particularly felt that it was just unseemly and just wrong. And so, and Universal were great, because obviously there's an expense involved, and there's a fear involved, and all the posters say a certain thing, and they're all geared to a release date, and they have to square it with the cinemas that want to release things. And so, we just felt it was, you know, we felt people would want to laugh, and we were hoping to put them in a position where they would want some joy. But to be trying to thrust joy down the throats of people that don't want it at that point, you know, want to take themselves seriously for that, you know, period of mourning, was just mistimed. And so, so we pushed it by several days, pushed it over the weekend. I think we came out on the Tuesday after, and it worked out fine. I mean, you know, so. Yeah, it was a strange moment, but it was, you know, and obviously, as you say, I'm the least powerful person in that room when it comes to release dates. It's all way above my pay grade. But I wasn't even consulted. I was informed. No, I listened. I was in the meeting. I listened, and so but, you know, I was entirely. I thought George was right. I thought, and the studio were great and supportive.
The really interesting release date I found was the American one, where you found yourself counter-programmed against Black Adam. And counter-programming was an old-fashioned thing when I was growing up, and it used to work. And in modern days, I've not seen counter-programming work to that effect, certainly not post-pandemic. I remember everything that came out opposite the last Spider-Man film just got completely flattened. Were you fearful there, or is that where the staggered release helps, in that you already had quite a lot in the bank by the time the film came to America?
Again, these things are outside my pay grade, so I stay out of it. To, you know,
but I'm just interested in your human.
I guess, but I mean, you know, I wrote Marigold Hotel a few years ago now, many years ago, and that came out against the Avengers. Yes. Literally, it came out the same way as the Avengers, and so that was the definition of counter programming. Yeah, and that did fine. You know, it was just a different audience, and so there were certainly fears. Black Adam, or whatever it would be, that a slightly older audience, that most of whom have seen this film, weren't coming to the cinema anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's not the same audience as the Black Adam or the Top Gun audience, and so glorious as Top Gun is, and deserving of all its squillions. And so that was the fear, that women, particularly over a certain over past 30, weren't necessarily coming to the cinema at all. And so it was a relief that they came, but I think they weren't really again, as the same with Marigold, they weren't necessarily intersecting with the same audience that were going to see the other film. And so the bigger fear, I think, less counter programming and more. But also, to a point, you're right. I mean, if they're going to go and see one film, then it would be the bigger film. Yeah. But again, we're happy and relieved that we sort of proved that they, Marigold was weird because none of us saw it coming. It wasn't like we thought, oh, there's a gap in the market. Let's make a film for old people because they're underserved. We just thought it was nice and we liked it. And then, bizarrely, surreally, they, kept showing up.
I'm sure I've told you this before, but the former manager of my local multiplex says his ideal film is Lady in the Van. Without question, it's Lady in the Van.
It's I mean, anything with Maggie, obviously anything with Maggie anywhere. But yeah, no, totally. I mean, that came to part also because they stick around. They don't rush out on the first weekend. We were still. I just got the email this morning. We were in the top 10 in America again last week or this weekend, and it's Monday when we're talking. So and I don't know how many weeks it's been out, but there's not that many films stick around that long. Do you know what I mean? And so Marigold was in the top 10 for months.
Still there.
It was never like this giant thing. They just kept going, which is why your friend, I imagine, they keep showing up.
I don't usually ask so many box office questions to a filmmaker. I feel a bit dirty by doing it. But I mean, there's two reasons I put them to you. Number one, you talked a few times there about the business and how, and clearly your head's locked into how the business side of this works, but also presumably because that unlocks the other things that you want to do. And I'm kind of curious that Mamma Mia unlocked, I'm badly paraphrasing, unlocked the opportunity to get something else moving. Has this sparked something else? I mean, because you're on a streak now from the outside looking in. You've had two that have delivered for Universal. Does that fast track kind of what you want to do?
Thanks very much. I don't know. We'll see. But you're right. Of course, you're right. And the paradox of the whole thing is that when people talk about, show business, and when people talk about movies at all as hits and flops, so there's no reason any of us should care other than the studio's accountant. You know what I mean? We shouldn't. Yeah. We don't have to know what films have made. It's just, are they good or are they not? That's all. That should be our only yardstick. And yet we all kind of, obviously for me or for someone making those films, then it becomes, if I lose a ton of money for the studio, then it's less likely. The main thing is just, will I get to do this again? Will I be lucky enough that they'll let me do this again? There's a story when David Lean was dying, John Boorman goes to see him and he knows it's going to be the last time he sees him, and they sit and they chat, and as the light dies outside the window, and finally John gets up and he says, I need to go, and they say their goodbyes, they have a hug, and just as John's leaving, David Lean says, haven't we been lucky? We made films. And John Boorman says, they tried to stop us. And David Lean says, yes, but we fooled them. And that, I think, is all that's all you can do. I think you just try and keep fooling them.
That's delicious. So how closely, put all the money aside, how closely have you followed the response to Ticket to Paradise? How much have you followed the audience response to it? Are you the kind of person who sneaks into the back row on opening weekend?
No, I'm not. I think we were critically pissed on, which was a surprise.
We were a bit, yeah.
Yeah, which was an odd thing. And Marigold was too, the first Marigold in the UK, and then it was praised in America.
Yeah.
So I think which was a surprise to everyone, because again, we just thought it was nice. Again, I'm not suggesting it reinvents the cinematic wheel, but it just, it's goodwill and it's nice and they're gorgeous, and but I don't really read them. Since Marigold, actually, when they were so rude, and I was so kind of, oh, that's weird. It's great. Yeah. Again, I'm not proud of or otherwise of my work, but it's the dames and it's India and John Madden and Ben Davis shot it beautifully. Like, what's not to like? It's like kicking a puppy. Do you know what I mean? And so, I was that was sort of, and then it did really well, and I was like, oh, they're just quite sad, those people. And so I stopped. I sort of glance at them, but I care much less. Do you know what I mean? Because it just. And I don't want to be, it'd be lovely if they were nice. I think they were nice I think they were nice about Mamma Mia. Yeah. But the Mamma Mia ones I've read were slightly kind of grudging anyway. Like, in the end, how can you resist it? And it's like, why try, jackass? Why not just go in wanting to enjoy it? Do you know what I mean? Why go with a sort of, why go with your guard up and that I have to smash it down? If it was a subtitled Ukrainian film about yogurt production, then I'm sure they'd go in.
That sounds amazing.
keenly. Yeah, but so I don't know. I'm not trying to be. So that was a surprise and a disappointment, I guess. But you try and, but then again, like Marigold, like a ton of people are gone and people have been lovely. And I remember Richard Curtis when Marigold was critically slammed. It really was like you needed a stair lift to get going, and lots of old age jokes. And and I remember Richard Curtis wrote me a thing going, all I can tell you is that from now on, all your interactions based on the film will be nothing but wonderful.
After the first 6 months, isn't it? You get all the crap comes in the first 6 months.
And it's just, and the fact, obviously, that it's taken so much money. That's probably why I think about it, because it sort of justifies, and then 6 months on, you've just got a whole lot of people that have seen it and it's made them happy, and that's great. So, but I try and separate myself as much as I can, because you just want to do the thing and then keep doing the thing and keep fooling them.
So, I mean, we're coming to the end of our time. So, I mean, you've told me what you're not doing next, that you're out of the Thursday Murder Club. But how many things have you got going on the go? Are you the kind of person who has 4 or 5 things moving and hopes one bubble up? Or is there something
less now? Because this was sort of, I was doing this quite sincere for a couple of years, which is why I'm out of other things that I was in. So this is no, I've just finished a film that I loved writing it, and I'm just about to offer that to an actor, and then I will tell them that I will only do it with them. And
well, I should hope so. And I trust you have a second set of principles if that doesn't work out.
I will work my way down my list of principles. But I'm about to write that email going, this only works.
I mean, so you are at the point where, I mean, presumably that goes through some agent or some rep or something
I'm
like that.
at the point where I sort of find out if this has made any difference at all to my career, or if it's, roundly rejected by everybody. And I'm just, but then, I mean, there's other stuff. I'm writing something else. I'm just starting to write something else. So it's if I write for, I mean, one of the things about being a writer director is that these things, it's 3 years between projects. You have to originate. So this script was actually extant from before, and I've just finished touching it up, and so it's now ready. But otherwise, I'll start again, and we'll talk in 3 years.
So if we meet back here, say in about a year's time, you'll have about 5 more books, just 5 more piles of books just to the side of you.
Yeah, but actually, last time we talked, I did say, I remember at the end of it, I did say the risk of sounding like an absolute twat, but I think I'm making a film with George Clooney and Julia Roberts.
You did say this.
You did say this. Normally, when you say that thing, it doesn't work. And then
you asked me to edit that out.
Oh, did I? Okay.
Yes. So now
that's right. But so this time I have no plans. But if I write for a while, that would be nice. It's been a turbulent year, so it would be lovely to hang out with my kids and write things.
Well, Ol Parker, thank you as always for your time. I look forward to welcoming you back.
An absolute pleasure and a privilege, Simon. All the best to you, mate.
And that was my conversation with Ol Parker, primarily for Ticket to Paradise, which again is on DVD and Blu-ray just at the time this podcast is coming out. It's also available on video on demand services as well. Which all brings me to the end of this special episode of Film Stories. As always, thank you for listening and thank you for your time. If I've not bored you completely, you can find more from me on Twitter at Simon Brew. Film Stories Twitter handle has actually changed. It's now at Film Stories. That sounds a bit easier, doesn't it? Our website filmstories.co.uk is updated every weekday with movie news, reviews, features. If you go to store.filmstories.co.uk, you can buy our print magazines. Our latest has just gone on sale with a huge interview with Roger Deakins leading that one. And if you really like this podcast, please leave a nice review, please subscribe to it, and if you want to put your hand in your pocket as well, if you go to patreon.com/Simon Brew, you get podcasts early, you get lots of gossip, you find out what we're up to, all that sort of thing. But I think that's enough for now, isn't it? I think you've tolerated me long enough. Without further ado, thank you so much for listening and thank you for your time. I'll be back soon with your regular episode of Film Stories. Until then, you will look after yourselves. Bye-bye.